right, let's start with a quiz today, shall we?
Start with what?
Wow, it's too bad you're on camera doing that.
No, I'm not. I just got a good shot of my fanny.
All right,
No, I'm always ready.
pop quiz. Whose name means substitute?
Seth.
Yeah, that's right. Substitute for whom?
Cain.
Cain. Yeah. No.
Abel.
Abel. Why Abel?
Because Abel died.
Because he did.
Because Abel died. Killed by who?
Cain.
Cain, whose name also could mean what?
Crusher. Just
Crusher.
flatten out.
Why was he named the Crusher?
You
Or
crush Satan's head.
Striker? What's that?
They wanted him to kill Satan.
Yeah, because they were hoping this would be the one that would crush Satan's head someday, right? That's right. So, a long time later, you come to a man whose name means exalted father. What's his name? Abraham. What were Abraham's two sons' names?
Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah, Ishmael and Isaac. Which one was older?
Ishmael.
Very good. Abraham left the city of Ur, which means what?
Fire.
Ur of the Chaldees. What does Chaldees mean?
Destruction.
Destruction. Fire and destruction. He was headed to a place called Canaan. What does Canaan mean?
Bow on one knee.
To bow the knee. But instead of going all the way there, he stopped at a place called Haran. What does Haran mean?
Fruitless.
Fruitless. Yeah.
Haran.
And he hung out there for about 7 years or so. Now, who was older, Abram or his wife?
Sarai. No, Abram.
Abram, yeah. He was about 10 years older, as I recall. 10 years older.
Ew, that age.
Yeah. So, when God called Abram, how many children did Abram have at that time?
None.
Zero.
Fruitless.
Yeah, very true. They're fruitless. Let's see, what else do I have on question? Stop it. Sorry, I'm talking to technology because it always responds. Have you guys ever watched any of those crazy office YouTube videos where guys go berserk because they get mad at their computer and so they start throwing it?
Oh, that's funny
I
to watch.
They are quite enjoyable. One guy, I knew exactly what it was. He couldn't get his printer to work, so he.
Office space.
I mean, no, this is a real camera. This is a real business or whatever. You could see him like trying to get it to print, it wouldn't work. So he runs over, like he's overlooking the printer and it's not printing. So he opens up the other copying machine lid, and then he grabs his monitor and he holds it over the copier. And he's like, but in the process, he rips it out of the wall and everything.
That's pretty funny.
But I could actually relate to his feeling. I've never been there where it just will print and you need it to print. Okay.
You have doors open.
Whose head's going to be crushed?
Satan.
Whose heel is going to be crushed?
Jesus.
Jesus is right. Or literally what?
Eve's son.
Eve's offspring, an offspring of the woman. Yeah, and it's a he. Already did that. I would like for you to name all the people saved in the flood.
Noah,
his wife, his
Shem,
other son,
Mrs. Sham, Mrs.
and their wives.
Yeah.
8
Very
people.
good.
There were 8
8 people in all. What New Testament writer talks about that? 8 people.
Moses.
Peter.
New Testament. Peter. Yeah. Peter.
You Judaizers.
Who wrote Genesis? Which son of Noah would Jesus ultimately come from?
Shem.
Shem got the biggest blessing, remember? So God will enlarge the tents of Shem. I don't know if we talked about this or not, but I'm going to ask you this. What does Babel mean?
Oh, that's the precursor
Confusion?
for Babylon?
Isn't confusion?
But
Well, there's a prophecy associated with it, but it literally, it pretty much means the same thing that it would if you said it in English.
people are
Blah,
battling.
blah, blah, babble,
Really?
babble, babble, babble.
You won't be
It's
able to
like
understand each other.
confusion, babble. Because when they were trying to build this massive tower, this monument to their greatness, God struck confusion with the languages and they were just babbling to each other. And then that is also associated with the prophecy later, and I believe it is associated with Babylon, because the prophets say you're going to be taken to a land where everything you hear is Babel, 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 a little here, a little there. Doesn't make sense to you. So.
But isn't Babylon in the land of Babel? Wasn't there like?
Well, yeah, I think you're right about
Yeah.
that.
Didn't it start there? That was where they were gonna build that thingy madoodle,
Yeah.
right?
The big tower.
Mm-hmm.
The giant
It may
whatchamacallit.
well be, but I
Maybe
don't
doodle better.
know
It
because
was
going
a
back
lot.
that far, geography might have looked a little different. But even if it didn't, I'm not exactly sure where it is because it just kind of says. I believe it says the plains of Shinar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
That's another name for.
I thought that was another name for the Fertile Crescent, which is
But
this
Babylon's
giant
Yeah.
area.
That's
Babylon's in the
Mesopotamia.
Fertile Crescent.
Babylon
Yeah.
is in the Fertile
So
Crescent.
they're-
Between two
But
rivers.
it's huge, you
But
know, it goes all
Shinar
the way
is
across
another
here, so I
word.
don't know if it's the exact same spot.
In a lot
Shinar
of
is
the
another word for Babel, though.
in a lot of the secular books, they say that the Tower of Babel that people believe in the Bible was a ziggurat from Babylon.
Oh.
But I don't.
Interesting.
But the timing isn't correct. Like it wouldn't have really been that.
Oh,
but
wouldn't
that's
have
what they
coincided.
explain it as.
Isn't that a Persian? Cigarette?
Eventually.
It's Babylon. And, I mean, maybe Persian too, but it was
I
Babylon.
thought it was
Is it like a
done by
citadel?
companies like, I don't know, Camel and others. Cigarette, sorry. Okay, I already asked that question.
He's on board.
No, I already asked that question. You guys did pretty good. You guys are on the ball here. Okay, great. Well, I wanted to pick up with the life of Abraham again and his two sons, because I'm afraid I might have glossed over some details, because there's so much that happens there. So, Genesis around chapter 12, 14, 15, then chapter 20, all right in that range, because there's a bunch of things that happen, and I think all of them are kind of important. So, starting off in chapter 12, somebody just give me the summary. What's going on in Genesis chapter 12?
Call of Abraham.
All right, all of Abram. Very good.
Is this
And
the
then,
covenant cut? Or no?
okay, new covenant, yes.
Is
Then
it?
after that, let's trace it. All right, so we've got the call of Abram.
Genesis.
But then in the last part of chapter 12, starting in verse 10 and following, where is Abram?
Egypt.
Why is he in Egypt?
Because he left there because of the famine.
There's a famine in the land. So
Sure.
if we do our fancy map thing, the Great Sea here, he travels down here to the land of Egypt, Red Sea. So he was supposed to dwell here in the land of Canaan, this particular land, but instead he goes down here to Egypt. Why? Because there's no famine. Now remember, did God tell him to go to Egypt? Where did God order him to go? Canaan, which
Immediately.
means what?
Bow on knee.
Yeah, the place where you bow the knee, right? But instead of going there, he, I shouldn't say instead, he went there, and then he had to wait around. And sometimes, I think we made the point, sometimes God commands something, but just because he commands it and you do it, doesn't mean like, okay, great, instant gratification. I'm so happy now. Everything's gone right ever since I obeyed God this one time. Sometimes it's not quite how it works, right? As a matter of fact, sometimes it gets harder. He's here, and he's starving. There's just not enough food around. So he makes a determination to go to Egypt. And did that get him into any kind of trouble?
Yes.
But he made a plan to stop it, right? What was his plan?
So give his wife away?
Marry off his.
Well, not exactly, but yes, exactly.
He told his wife was his sister.
Yeah, just lie. Just say you're my sister because we are kind of related, you know. So, yeah. So because of that, she did. And she was what, about how old at this time? 60? Is that what we determined?
But she was so beautiful.
Beautiful.
65. She's at least 65.
Beautiful at the age of 65. So, what was Satan's move? Obviously, Satan is hoping that this Egyptian king, this Abimelech, would take, this Pharaoh would take Sarai and have kids. Because what does that do to the race?
Mix it.
Now, why would mixing it be such a problem at this particular time? Couldn't God just pick somebody else?
Mudding up the bloodline of Eve.
Well, couldn't he just choose somebody else from the bloodline of Eve?
No, it won't.
Why not? You're right, but why not?
He was a direct descendant.
Because God had said to Abraham, he said, I'm going to bless you and your offspring. So God narrowed the promise down to Abram. So Satan realized that, so Satan didn't need to bother going after everyone else, so he just focused on Abram. And if he had succeeded here, did Abram have any kids at this time?
No.
No.
No, he didn't. So Abram would have lost his wife, and that probably would have been the end of it. It would have mixed seed, and hopefully in the process they would have just killed Abram anyway, because he would have been a liability at that point. So that's what Satan's trying to do here. However, God steps in. How does God step into this chapter?
Plagues them.
A terrible plague, and fortunately Pharaoh's superstitious enough to realize that, wait a minute, life was good until he got here. Why did this happen all of a sudden? He put two and two together and he realized, this guy was lying to me. And then Pharaoh sends them out of the country under armed escort, it says. But in the process, he gains some more stuff. So that's nice. Then, in chapter 13, what happens?
Abram and Lot go at different ways because he lets Lot pick whichever area he wants.
Yes, exactly. In chapter 13, Abram and Lot are having a dispute, basically, because there's just not enough room for both of them in the same territory. They're causing problems. Why is Abram having problems when he's doing what God wants? Well, in this area, he didn't, did he? He took Lot along with him. He wasn't supposed to do that. He was supposed to leave Lot, but he didn't. So now, as a result, they've grown up, and Abram plays the bigger man here. He says, which way do you want to go? You go this way, I'll go that way. You go that way, I'll go this way. I'll go the opposite direction. You just pick. And so Lot chooses the cities of the plain, where the city of Sodom is, the city of Gomorrah is, Admah, Zeboim. He chose those particular cities, and so Abram went the other direction. That's what happens in chapter 13. Both of them are prosperous at this time. Then in chapter 14, we read about a war that breaks out. And what's crucial about this war is it happens to affect the king of the region of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, all these places where Lot is dwelling. So you read about this fight that goes on there in war. And then in verse 12 it says, they also captured Lot, Abram's nephew, who lived in Sodom, and took everything he owned. One of the men who had escaped told Abram the Hebrew, who was camping at the oak grove belonging to Mamre the Amorite. Mamre and his relatives Eshcol, Aner, were Abraham's allies. When Abram learned that Lot had been captured, he called together the men born into his household, 318 of them in all. He chased after Chedorlaomer's army until he caught up with them in Dan. So Abram is in a war now. A war with the only troops he has, the people that have been brought up in his own household, 318 servants, and they go down and they fight, and they end up winning. God gives him a pretty amazing victory here. So that's wonderful. But he wouldn't have even had to fight if he had obeyed in the first place, right? So presumably Satan's behind all this too. Anything to get Abram to die, because Abram doesn't have kids yet, and if he dies, it's over. If he dies, Satan all of a sudden will not have anyone to crush his head anymore. So that's Satan's move, is basically kill Abram. Or if it's not kill Abram, it's corrupt Abram. It's kill somebody close to him. It's mess with Abram. Do anything I can to get rid of him, because the spotlight is on this guy Abram. However, God's move in all this is what? I'll just say, save Abram. It seems like no matter what happens, Abram gets himself into a lot of trouble, or Satan gets into a lot of trouble, but Abram does not die. We continue in chapter 14. He rescues his nephew Lot. And then the Lord's covenant is made, where he reassures in chapter 15 again. God says, hey, don't give up, I'm with you. By the way, that's one of the cool things that God does in the Bible, is a lot of times he comes back and he repeats himself and he encourages you again. And I've noticed in my own life, and I think you guys will maybe testify to this, that God has a way of coming in and reassuring you at a time when you really, really kind of need him. Sometimes he's not telling you anything new, he's just reminding you of what you already know, But God has a way of doing that. We talked about this in an earlier class. What minor prophet gives one sermon to command the people to start building the temple again, but 3 sermons to just keep them doing it?
Haggai.
The prophet Haggai. You read The book of Haggai, it's a rather short book, but he's an old prophet who, when the people were not building up God's temple like they should, they were focusing on their own homes and other projects. And so he gets up and he preaches one sermon, one short sermon, says, what are you guys doing? Get back, build this temple. And everyone does. He has like the greatest success rate of all preachers. One guy, it's one sermon, he's done. But the book has 3 more sermons after that, and those 3 are to keep them going. So that's a valuable lesson for us. A lot of times we think, yes, I got him to do it. I got him baptized. We're done. Yeah, right. No. The hard part is you got to keep going, right? So God reaffirms the covenant with Abram. Well, that's very nice. You know, God's reminding him he's with us. Which would make sense when we get to chapter 16, that Sarai, his wife, had no children. And so, wait a minute. So much for reassurance. Sarai, Abram's wife, had no children, so Sarai took her servant, an Egyptian woman named Hagar, and gave her to Abram so she could bear his children. The Lord has kept me from having any children, Sarai said to Abram. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram said, that's wrong, Sarai. We trust God. And besides, I'm not supposed to sleep with any other woman. You know that. I know that. I would never do that. That's what he should have said. No. He said it.
Okay.
Abram agreed. You know what? It's tough being Abram sometimes, but, you know, he's just got to do what he's got to do, right? Got to listen to your wife, apparently, right? That's important. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, gave her to Abram as a second wife, another wife. This happened 10 years after Abram first arrived in the land of Canaan. And Abram sleeps with Hagar, and she does get pregnant. Now, we've talked about this, but what was Satan's goal in having Hagar with... Yeah, it mixes it. How? What is Hagar?
She's Egyptian.
She's Egyptian.
Yeah, and it's not through Shem or whatever, right? It'd be,
It would be half and half,
it'd be
right?
like Ham through Ham too, or something.
Yes, Egyptians are, you're right, they're Ham's offspring. You're right. So it would not be a clear Shemite, and it would be mixed. And that was Satan's intention. But it's just funny because God finishes reassuring him, and then the pressure is put on Abram, and it's easy to point the finger at Sarai and it's like, Sarai, what are you doing? You know, why are you being so difficult? God just, you know. But I'm kind of thinking, you know what, Abram, this is a male-dominated society too, right? Abram is the man of his house. So he's not doing anything that he doesn't want to do, and he could easily speak up and say, no, that's not right, we shouldn't do this. But he doesn't do that. He instead says, okay, maybe that's how God's going to, you know, bless us. Maybe that's what he's going to do. So I don't think you can paint this any positive way. It was just a bad decision. It's something they should not have done, and there are great consequences associated with it. Some of which we're still living with today.
And if they wouldn't have gone to Egypt, they probably wouldn't have had this slave either. Like,
that's an excellent point.
But,
Where are they getting an Egyptian servant from? An Egyptian handmaid? Probably from their trip to Egypt, you know. Got a little stuff on the side to come back with.
maybe that's what, I mean, because didn't it say when Pharaoh took Sarai, he was like, here, have some slaves, male and female.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Lucky
sure.
as
Animals too.
So,
So they-
in chapter 16, let's see. Before you even get to the end of chapter 16, Hagar and Ishmael are running away. Let's see. Let's look at this. Oh, yeah, I love the turn of events here. Once you get to chapter 16, not 5 verses down, well, verse 4. So Abram slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. When Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, it's all your fault. Now this servant of mine is pregnant, and she despises me, though I myself gave her the privilege of sleeping with you. The Lord will make you pay for doing this to me. And then Abram's very manly response is, since she's your servant, you deal with her as you see fit. So Sarai treated her harshly, and Hagar ran away. So Abram listens to his wife the one time when he shouldn't have, And then his wife is insanely angry at him, and when he has a chance to redeem himself and to stand up and do what's right, says, you deal with it. I don't want to mess with this. I was just,
You've gotten in enough trouble.
yeah, I'm just doing what I want to do, and that's it. And he's done. So that's what she does, and then they're running away. But the angel of the Lord said, return to your mistress, submit to her authority. And the angel added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. And the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. And you are to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard about your misery. The son of yours will be a wild one, free and untamed as a wild donkey. He will be against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live at odds with the rest of his brothers. So Hagar gets a blessing from God, which is cool because God didn't have to do that, but he did anyway. Then, chapter 17, Abram's name changed to Abraham, which is how we know him. And then in chapter 18, the Lord appeared again to Abraham while he was camped near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. And one day, about noon, as Abram was sitting at the entrance of his tent, he suddenly noticed 3 standing nearby. He got up and ran to meet them, welcoming them by bowing low to the ground. My Lord, he said, and by the way, Lord, I have lowercase l in my Bible. What do you guys have?
Yeah.
You have capital all caps?
A footnote has lowercase, but
What
no,
verse?
it's just Lord is,
It's not, okay.
or
And
the L in Lord.
okay, just a capital L, but the rest is lowercase.
Yeah.
The newer translations often, when it's the name Yahweh, God's proper name, they'll have the word Lord, but it'll be all caps, like capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. And the other caps might be shrunk a bit, but they're still capital letters. This doesn't have that, so this is probably Adonai, which is the word that means what?
Master.
Yeah, like Mr., Master, Lord, Servant. The idea of sort of like a landlord or whatever, you know, but more so just a pretty common term, common greeting. He said, if it pleases you, stop here for a while, rest in the shade of this tree, while my servants get some water to wash your feet. That was a custom of that day because people get dirty feet. So that was more common then. It would be creepy if you did that today. That's not. There was a girl that we know from this church that talked about how one guy came up to her in the store one time and said, "Oh, I know this place that gives great foot massages. I'm telling you, you should try it. It's so wonderful." She's like, "Oh, okay." And then he gets down and he starts massaging her feet. Was that awkward? Yes, it was awkward. Incredibly awkward. Yeah. So some things just culturally they don't translate. So beware that we do. You know, you hear about foot washing services and things like that. You gotta be careful with that stuff because culturally it makes sense in an area where you're walking in sandals, you get dirt all over your feet. That was just a custom. Before you walk into somebody's house, they have someone clean your feet off. You know. So Abraham now, he's being very hospitable. They prepare food for him, run back to the tent, and he tells his wife, let's get the food ready. Then, verse 10, one of them said, about this time next year I will return, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Now Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent nearby, and since Abraham and Sarah were both very old, Sarah was long past the age of having children. She laughed silently to herself. How could a worn-out woman like me have a baby, she thought. And when my master, my husband, is also so old. Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh?
No, that's capitalized.
Ha ha ha, you're right. What's interesting here is all it says is 3 men showed up to visit. Abraham is being polite. But then as time goes on, these men start talking, and then you realize these aren't just men that showed up here. One of these guys has made it clear he isn't just an angel either. He is the Lord. All caps, you're right. That's God speaking. Why is that? What is that called, by the way, when God shows up in another form?
A theophany.
Yeah, that's the fancy word for it.
Theophany?
We're in chapter 18, around verse 13. A theophany is a manifestation of God. It's where God comes and shows himself in some way that we can understand, because God's spirit, right? We can't actually see spirit.
Like the burning bush?
The burning bush is a perfect example of a theophany.
Okay.
Yeah, because God was there, God was speaking, from that bush or whatever. It was holy ground, but God is not literally a burning bush. That's not what you're going to see when you make it to heaven.
Or a pillar of fire.
Yes, exactly. So those are how God manifests himself. A theophany is what that is. Well, that's what God's doing here as a person. And so you'd assume there are angels with him, but they look like men. That's who they think they're dealing with here. Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? About a year from now, just as I told you, I will return and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she denied that she had laughed. But he said, that's not true, you did laugh. Yeah, God called you out. That's got to be one of the most awkward moments in Scripture, where Sarah laughs kind of silently to herself, hoping that nobody hears, only to realize, wait a minute, this is God. And then God says, why did she laugh? And she's so scared to death that she just thinks, oh, I know, I'll lie. That works with God. Yeah, I didn't laugh. And then, you know how God feels about sin, right? You know how he feels. It's almost like I picture God like ready to strike her dead, but yeah, you did. She got off pretty easy. A lot of people, remember somebody else who lied to the Holy Spirit in the New Testament? What happened to them? 2 people, Ananias and Sapphira. They lied to the Holy Spirit.
Well, they got burned on the spot.
They were struck dead on the spot. Yeah.
What do you think the laugh that Sarah gives is like, or whatever? I heard a sermon about this one time, and he said like it could be a laugh of like, yeah, right, kind of like that, but also like a laugh of disbelief. But also another way that they said is like having kids was like a huge pleasure for them to have and everything. So the way they said it is almost like a giggle, like she's like, ooh, yay.
Why are you giggling?
Kind of
I'm not.
Interesting.
I wasn't.
I'm not excited about this.
Like a bad teacher.
That's
Not
interesting.
at all.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
I always thought.
But why
and-
would she deny it then?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, she denied it, but also it gives her rationale, right? Like, he's so old and I'm so old, and then she laughs. But then maybe she also laughs at just the idea
But
of
doesn't
like,
she
how
point
crazy
out?
would that be.
Doesn't she point out later how it was like it's a huge blessing, basically? So I don't know. It just
Interesting.
plays in my
Well,
mind
is that
a little
before or
bit with
after God straight calls her out?
Another
Okay.
question.
You did.
Were they older than most normal people then, or were all people about that same age? I mean.
Oh, I think my understanding is that this is old. at that
Okay,
time.
so
they're
there was,
old.
okay, they were really old because I know God let people live to like
Yeah,
160.
before the flood in particular, that
Yeah.
was happening a lot. But after the flood,
Huh?
it takes a sharp turn. Like Noah's still really old, yeah, but it takes a sharp turn down to where the lifespan is way, way less.
Yeah.
I mean, Abram. I keep saying Abram now. Abraham still lives a pretty long time. It's pretty amazing. But the people after this, you see, they don't really live all that long. Not that much longer than we would. A bit, but not a bunch. So, but right after this, Abraham starts praying to God. He dealt with the little laughing situation, and then
But he laughed too.
What?
But in 17, he laughs too. It says,
Ooh.
Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael might live under your blessings. And that's after that, God says, yes, she will. But then he agreed to bless Ishmael as well.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So you're
So
right.
they both laughed
they
at
both
God.
laughed. Yeah. Not a good idea, but they did.
Is there
They
any
did.
record
not
of,
see
because
that.
he says like when we come this time again next year you will have a child. But
Right.
There's no record of them coming. I mean, is that just like a phrase like, in another year? You know what I mean? Like, is there any record of them coming back?
I never thought about that. As far as God showing up again, I have to think
Maybe
on that
she's
because I don't know
Oh,
if
man, no,
there's
no.
another instance of them a year later showing up or not, or it could just be that it's not written in Scripture. Something that happened
Well, he did show up when Isaac was 13, and he told Abraham.
much
to
later
take-
on. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. He did. He is going to show up later.
But not in this kind of visit.
this
is a crazy
special
visit.
theophany. What I think is crazy about this, and that's why I was kind of snickering to myself, is that, okay, they're dealing with God as if God was a person, right? Because God is manifesting flesh here. So what could that mean?
That he visited them more often than we think.
Maybe. Or could it also mean that they're talking to Jesus?
Jesus.
God in the flesh. Isn't that who Jesus is? I mean, I understand the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. I believe they're separate minds, for sure. But one of the things I understand about like George Fall, for instance, is he takes a lot of these theophanies to be Jesus coming,
Right.
which is pretty amazing. But you know what? It's essentially the same as if Jesus were there. That's for sure, right?
Does it say he's in flesh, or does it just say? I know it says.
It just says man.
Lord.
It just
might be
says
the
man,
spirit.
sir. It could be, but there is a body there in front. You know what I'm saying? Because Abraham fixes a meal for them. They're eating together. That's something the bodies do. So and it says three visitors, I guess is what it says, doesn't it?
But
Whoops.
If I were going to like teach this
Three
to
men.
people though, I wouldn't say the one time Jesus came to Abraham's house. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
I just word it how the Bible words it and just present it like you are, just as this is the
God
idea.
came. It's just as amazing. It doesn't,
yeah, it is
anyway.
amazing.
Well, there's some. They had to be in flesh because it says they ate. So
Yeah.
there wasn't just like looking like they.
Like prankster ghosts.
I always
Mix
think-
as much food as you possibly can.
Yes.
They just falls through
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Not Casper or
I was just
No, I was thinking of
Because it
Pirates
popped
of
into
the
my mind.
Caribbean. Okay. Well, the men got up from their meal, so apparently they ate or they hid it really well. They tricked them. And started on towards Sodom. Abram went with them part of the way. Should I hide my plan from Abraham, the Lord asked. For Abraham will become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord. He's giving him another blessing yet again. The two other men went on towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham for a while.
Is that capital R?
Abraham, yeah, it is. Abraham approached him and said, "Will you destroy both the innocent with the guilty alike?" Now, what's crazy to me is that three people together, God is one of them, they come and they have a meal. Jesus has communion with Abraham and Sarah.
Right, you're pushing it.
Yeah.
Same ideas though.
Yeah.
And then afterwards he says, "Let's go. Come on, Abraham, let's go. Let's talk." And they walk out, and then the other two go on toward where?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
And then he says, should I hide from you what I'm about to do? Let me tell you what I'm about to do to Sodom. He's on the way to do it. He is
That's
headed
crazy.
towards Sodom to enact a terrible judgment. But it's as though, hey, I'm going to Sodom. You want to talk to me first about anything? And Abraham does pray, and he prays this very faithful prayer or whatever, but don't forget, he's right there. He's praying to God. He is communicating with God, but God is right there with him, having this conversation. Suppose you find 50 innocent people there within the city. Will you still destroy it for their sakes? Surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroy the innocent with the guilty. Why, you would be treating the innocent and the guilty exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth do what is right? And the Lord replied, if I find 50 innocent people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake. Then Abraham spoke again, since I began, let me go on to speak further to my Lord. Even though I am but dust and ashes. He's very careful, very humble in this. Suppose there are only 45. Will you destroy the city for the lack of 5? The Lord said, I will not destroy it if there are only 45. Then Abraham pressed his request further. Suppose there are only 40. And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it if there are only 40. Please don't be angry, my Lord. Abraham pleaded, let me speak. Suppose only 30 are found. And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it if there are 30. Abraham said, since I have dared to speak to the Lord, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And the Lord said, then I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. Finally, Abraham said, Lord, please do not get angry. I will speak but once more. Suppose only 10 are found there. And the Lord said, then for the sake of the 10, I will not destroy it. The Lord went on his way when he had finished his conversation with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his tent.
Okay. Where does it say that that was a prayer? That sounded to me like he was dickering with God.
He was.
But he wasn't praying though. He wasn't, because he
Well,
was like face to face with the guy.
It is, but it still is a prayer. You know?
Well, because it's a request.
It depends on how you're going to define it, but like when you go through Jeremiah, the definition of prayer that I'm used to operating by is any conversation or communication with God. Is the idea of a prayer.
Okay.
And the term prayer literally means to ask. You know, I pray that you would give me that slice of pizza. That means you're asking for that slice of pizza.
You're like, no, I ate it.
Well, that's what he's doing. He's asking for things to God. So, and the other reason why I say that is because I've heard a lot of people talk about this as Abraham's great intercessory prayer. You'll hear it referred to like that. And it's easy to forget, oh yeah, God was right there with them talking back and forth, you know. Because you think of God in the heavens responding back, but wait, he's standing right there. I can hardly put my mind around it. It's pretty amazing. So,
What if Abram would have asked for more?
it makes you wonder, why'd you stop at 10? You were on a roll.
Right.
Maybe you were down from 50 all the way to 10.
They destroyed it anyways, and
But you're right, they did destroy it anyways, because what does that tell you, by the way, if they destroyed it
Less than
anyways?
10.
There was not even 10 righteous people in the whole place.
Okay.
And presumably, we're talking about, it's not just Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim. 4 cities. Not even 10 righteous people in all 4 of these cities that could be found.
So
Pretty
the
bad.
babies were born sinful then.
I don't think they would count the babies because once
No.
you reach a certain age,
That's
is
just a
when
bad
they make your
hermeneutic there.
decisions.
They may not have been born sinful, but were they righteous?
No.
You know what I'm saying?
They weren't, and they weren't being brought up in the way
I
of
think
God.
it's interesting what you're saying, but I don't think they're going to be accounted for. I don't think they're capable of committing sin. Put it that way. So.
That's just not
futuristic-
about
Don't answer that
futuristic sin.
question.
Thank you. I
Don't answer
won't.
that question.
Yeah. Anyway, really bad. But I mean, pause for a second though. What do you think did happen to those kids that were killed?
There it happened.
They went to
I
paradise.
think they got to enjoy paradise, yeah, because they are not able to commit sin at that age yet. There's no law.
Maybe it was a
no
great
sin.
blessing on their life.
Probably was. God would know
They're
that.
Dash those
afterlife.
babies' heads in the
Yeah.
nose.
So, a lot of bad.
A lot of blessings.
Then so the people come into town, and these men, who are more than just men, so who might they be? Well, I'm assuming, maybe, I don't know if it's some sort of, the death angels there or somebody else or what. It doesn't say. But they come into town, and then all the people, I can't look at that clock. It's not right. It lies to me. Okay, thank you. They come into town, and everyone in the town that is wicked, well, let's see. Let's look at how this happens. A man sees them, because what was the common practice? When you come into a village, you stay the night, like in the town square. You just, you hang out. Or you find whoever you're looking for and you go visit them. Well, let's see. That evening, the 2 angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom, and Lot was sitting there as they arrived. When he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them and bowed low to the ground. "My lords," he said, "come home to wash your feet and be my guests for the night. You may then get up in the morning as early as you'd like and be on your way." "Oh no," they said, "we'll just spend the night out here in the city square." But Lot insisted.
Oh,
So,
I was reading ahead.
So at last they went home with him. He set a great feast before them, complete with fresh bread made without yeast. More communion going on here. After the meal, as they were preparing to retire for the night, how many of the men? All the men of Sodom. All usually means all. Definitely a lot. All the men of the entire city, young and old. Now we're emphasizing all. Everyone and even their sons came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted out to Lot, "Where are the men that came to spend the night with you? Bring them out so we can have sex with them."
That was that part.
Lot stepped inside or stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind them. "Please, my brothers," he begged, "don't do such a wicked thing. Look," oh, this is a wonderful thing that he does.
Wow.
"Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Do with them as you wish, but leave these men alone, for they are under my protection."
They're not your daughters.
Yeah, not your daughters. Unfortunately, women, lower class citizens at this time is what they were considered. And this shows the terrible bias that they had. Very sad thing for him to do, a good person like him. Probably thought he was doing a noble thing too. It's really sad. "Stand back," they shouted. "Who do you think you are? We let you settle among us, and now you're trying to tell us what to do? We'll treat you far worse than those other men." And then they lunged at Lot and began breaking down the door. Wow. Now, that's a little scary when that many men say, "Oh, we're going to treat you worse." That's a bad sign. But it doesn't say 2 men now, does it? Verse 10, what does it say? But the 2 what?
But the men inside.
Your version says men?
Yeah, the men
Yeah.
reached out.
My version switches to angels. That's interesting. So maybe they're just translating it. Maybe it's still men.
Doesn't it say angels at the very beginning of yours though?
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
19
Oh, you're right.
it says.
Yeah, at the very
2
beginning.
angels
it says
came
2
in.
angels.
You're right. Thank you. But the 2 angels reached out and pulled Lot in and bolted the door. Then they blinded the men of Sodom so they couldn't find the doorway. "Do you have any other relatives here in the city?" the angels asked. "Get them out of this place, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone else, for we will destroy the city completely. The stench of the place has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot rushed out to tell his daughters, fiancés, "Quick, get out of the city. The Lord is going to destroy it." But the young men thought he was only joking. At dawn the next morning, the angels became insistent. "Hurry," they said to Lot, "take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here." So this terrible event happens. They end up running away, but the soon-to-be sons-in-law don't even go with them because they think, "Oh, it's just a joke. You're kidding."
But it said all the men, and said he went out and talked to the young men fiancés. So those men would also have been out there,
Yeah,
wouldn't
could they have been in that group of men?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if they were in the group not knowing what's going on.
But it said all men.
Yeah, sometimes that is used as a exaggeration on purpose to say all kinds. Both.
Okay.
So when it says all, both young and old, it's not just all the men of this corner, all the bad guys of the gang. No, it's from all over the place. You know? And I guess my reference with that would be for John the Baptist, because it said that when John the Baptist preached, that all Israel came out to hear him preach his baptism of repentance. But we know not every single person did.
Yeah.
But it said all, and the expression is used to mean all kinds of them, you know,
Oh, okay.
a huge amount. Yeah. Probably
This
not
guy
every
might have
single
been out
one.
there for that and been really wicked, but he's related to Lot.
No, not yet. They were just
Doesn't-
fiancés.
Engaged.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily
Oh,
say, you know, so there's silence there. It's a bad place. However, I don't know, like what kind of jokes are they used to hearing from Lot, you know? I'm just thinking, like, usually if I were that crazy running away from my life, usually you can tell when somebody's joking. Serious about
So
Well,
true.
maybe if it came just after the guys were blinded, maybe he's like, who knows? Maybe he was still blind. I don't know. Like, but you remember,
Oh,
like,
they can't
if
see.
Lot went out, like he went out in the middle of all of them, trying to like.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
trust
Did
a
they make
guy.
their
It'd
way
be
home
crazy to
blind?
see
This is
a
the
whole
world's
ton of
biggest
blind
prank.
people.
I wouldn't
Playing
trust a
blind
guy who
basketball.
was just trying to feed his daughters to a mob.
Oh,
His
boy.
wife.
Different
Might
time.
have hurt his credibility there. So Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, and what's the famous thing that happened in the process of Lot and his family fleeing from Sodom and Gomorrah? What happened?
She looks.
She looks back.
But why
Lot's
did she
wife
look
looks
back?
She wants to go back.
No.
What?
See
What?
what's going on,
But why did she look back?
Why does she look back?
Because
She
she,
wants to
for
go
one,
home, baby.
she was. Those were more important to her than God.
Presumably, she preferred her life, her home, her comfort.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Yeah.
she probably from? I mean, does it say like?
Oh,
Only
was she
Lot.
from?
I mean, because he had to get married at some point, right? Like
I don't know.
he wasn't. He didn't have a wife when he went with Abraham and left and stuff, right? Like
I don't know. That's
No,
I
it
never
didn't
thought
say
about
that. What'd you say?
Cart. I mean, Chen. What'd you
I never thought about that.
yeah, I don't know.
That's
say?
all.
Maybe she was actually from there or something.
Whether or not she was from there, though, God made it clear, don't look back. And so why do you go directly against the command of God? Just I mean, I used to think, oh, she was just curious. She's like, ooh, I wonder how God's doing it. I wonder how he's killing people. But the older I get, the more I realize, you know, when you've lived somewhere for a long time, you've settled in, you've got roots, you probably, you know, you probably love it, and you're traumatized. You don't want to leave it, you know. So, like you said, I think
it's because God wasn't the major force in her life.
well, clearly not, because God's the only one telling her not to look back, and
Yeah.
she decided, no, I'm
Yeah.
not going to listen to that. I'm going to look back.
Right.
So I agree with you. I
So
think,
whatever her lust at the time was, which was her home.
which is a good reminder that you can really love stuff, but as long as you really love God more, you know, most all the time, that's what matters.
Believe it.
Okay, gotta move on. So, anyway, what's Satan trying to do? He's trying to get Abraham killed. So, how would this be a problem? Well, now Abram's discouraged because he's got family problems, and there's this huge thing going on. But then we got to pick it up here in chapter 19 is a disgusting chapter in the Bible. You can read that in your own. Chapter 20 is just sad to see what happens. Chapter 20 tells us something. Abraham is where?
Again.
Abraham moved south of Negev, settled for a while, and he talks to a person named Abimelech. That's probably a title. My father is King Abimelech. That's probably what the title. And he's worried about what might happen. Why? Because his wife is awfully good looking, and here we go, dealing with another foreign king. So I don't know, I have a brilliant idea. It worked so great last time, right? We'll just say, you're my sister. And he does. He does. So he lied twice, 2 different times.
Isn't Sarah pregnant at this point too?
And old.
Old and pregnant.
Ideal woman.
Really dig
She
pregnant.
must be
No,
amazing.
I mean,
I'm
it
telling
doesn't
you.
say until like chapter
Gross.
21
No, really,
that
It's
she
true.
conceived or whatever. So like 21.
No, and she's 80-ish.
So,
But if she was pregnant,
But her
then they wouldn't
80
have had to worry about the king taking her as a wife, probably, right?
yeah, chronologically.
Well, there's the waiting period to make sure that she's not pregnant.
Well, that was Egypt, though. This is not.
Oh, that's true. Crap. That's.
Well, when he came, he said within a year. It takes 9 months, so you gotta wait 3
Yeah,
months.
sometimes
for conception.
sometimes the scripture is not written in chronological order. though,
That's
so
true.
You gotta take that into consideration. But regardless, the point is he did it twice, 2 different times, trying to get out of a tough
She has
situation.
wrinkles instead of
And,
spots.
and
You
Abimelech,
might not know that her
what does Abimelech do? He takes her as a wife. So what's God's move this time? Satan is trying to do what? He's trying to mix the seed, mix the offspring with Abimelech. God's move is what? What does it say in chapter 20?
Oh, he,
You talking about when he talks to Abimelech in the dream? He tells him he's as good as dead.
Yeah, that's a nice dream, especially in a time when people are really superstitious. You are as good as dead because you took that man's wife, right? So he came to him in a dream, freaked him out, and what else happened as well?
he said he'd kill us, the whole city, didn't he?
Where does it say that? Oh, I like how in verse 6 God says, I know you're innocent, you didn't realize this, that's why I kept you from sinning. How did God keep them from sinning? When you look down further, you're going to find out what it was. Let's see.
He didn't touch her.
Verse 17, then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and the other woman of the household, so they could have children. For the Lord had stricken all the women with infertility as a warning to Abimelech for having taken Abraham's wife. What was Satan's goal here? The very purpose of this mixed marriage was supposed to be so that the seed of Abraham would get mixed up. They would have kids. So God did what? None of you are having kids.
But it makes you wonder, like, how did they know their wombs were closed? Like, how long was she in that court? Like, how long was she there? You wouldn't know, like, in one day, oh, our wombs are closed. Like, you wouldn't know that until...
You're asking about anatomy that I'm not all that familiar
No,
with.
but
Talk
I'm
about.
saying it
I
would
mean,
take at
couldn't
least
you-
a month before they knew whether they were having a baby or not, so...
Maybe
Could-
they
could
stopped
this
I would
be-
think
periods
if
and
your
everything
organs were
like that.
altered somewhat, you would probably feel something. Ooh.
Could
Unless
you
you can
feel
really take
closed?
away the-
I don't know. I feel closed off right now. This feels
Giant plug
terrible.
up there.
Not tonight.
But I mean, no, but I'm saying she had to be there for a while for them to know that
Everybody else.
no one else
Well,
was getting pregnant. So.
Usually, too, I mean,
Like-
most men at that time, I don't believe, were like oh look, she's pretty. Wife, come here. They don't usually. It usually takes some time
Unless
for
you're
that to
Samson.
happen, right? Unless you're
Wait, I thought
Samson,
you
you just carry her off.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I found her. Go get her. She's
They were
mine.
extremely patient back then too. It's like, I'll just hang out here for 7 years. I'll hang out here for 10. I'm 100. I'll hang out a bit
wow.
more.
Then the Lord did, in chapter 21, the Lord did exactly what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant. She gave birth to Abraham, gave a son to Abraham in his old age. It all happened in the time God had said it would. And Abraham named his son Isaac. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. Abraham was 100 years old at that time, and Sarah declared she was 90. God has oh, is that what it says? I thought it said 90.
Where?
I'm thinking of
She
the
was
New Testament.
90.
I'm thinking of the
He
New
is 100.
Testament in Galatians, I believe. Or no,
Okay.
maybe it was in Acts.
Okay.
Sorry. Check me out on that later. And Sarah declared, God has brought to me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me instead of at me, which they were doing before. For who would have dreamed that I would ever have a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. So this child's going to grow up, and then in the next chapter, chapter 22, there's going to be that great test. Now, I think most of you guys know it. How much time we got left? All right, not much time. Abraham is told, take your son, Isaac, your one and only son that you love. He's the true offspring. Keep in mind, Satan's going to be scared to death. And when Satan's observing this, what is going on in Satan's mind? Like, is God just taunting me on purpose? Is this some sort of a sick joke? Because God comes to him and says, take that son that you love and sacrifice him to me as an offering. Well, how old is Isaac at this time? We don't really know, but we do know he's old enough to carry the firewood up a mountain. So he's probably doing pretty good health-wise. Now, how old is his dad? Well past 100. Probably not as good health-wise, right? So I'm of the opinion Isaac had to go along with this. There was no forcing him because his dad's probably the weaker one here. That's why son's carrying the heavy load, you know. So they go up this mountain, and you guys remember what happens, right? They are all there, and then Isaac asks the question, hey, we've got the wood, but where's the lamb? Where's the ram
Where's the offering?
for the sacrifice? And Abraham's words are pretty amazing when you think about it. He says, God himself will provide the sacrifice. God will provide a sacrifice. And what you all know what ends up happening. Right when he is ready to kill his son, he's going to do it. Whoa,
This
crazy.
is ridiculous.
Sorry, this is ridiculous.
It does it on
White noise.
random.
Oh, really? Sorry. Right when he does that, what happens?
God stops him.
God sends an angel, says, don't do that. Now I know. And there's a ram that's caught in the thicket, right? Well, my understanding is this is the traditional site, and a lot of like Bible atlases and encyclopedias will talk about this, that this is actually the same mountain, a lot of people think, where a long time later Jesus is going to be offered up. And isn't it interesting that right there, what does he say? God himself, son, God himself will provide a sacrifice. Well, when you get to the life of Jesus, what do you have? God himself provides a sacrifice. He is the sacrifice. So I think that's pretty cool.
The other thing I like about you saying Isaac kind of willingly did it is it says that Isaac was like wrapped up in rope. His bond, he was bounded.
Yeah, tied him up.
Which I mean,
It's
he
hard
would
to tie
either
somebody up that
have to
doesn't work.
overpower Isaac, or Isaac would just be like, all right.
I'm thinking you'd have to knock them out or something, right? Or get them to not move, because how can you tie up someone that's shaking all over the place? Even if they're way weaker than you, it's not easy to do, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we're done, so let's go ahead and pray, shall we? God, thank you for your son who was provided as a sacrifice, and I guess the only difference is he actually did have to suffer a death so that we don't have to. And God, thank you for doing that for us. Help us to appreciate it more, and God, I want to pray that we not only see how you're working, but that we're more aware of how the enemy's working too, because we know he's out there trying to get us, and we have a victory if we're on your side. Help us to stay that way. And it's in your son's name I pray.
Amen. Question.